My initial plan was going to be to recap this before I got into Series 2, separate each series with the movie. I then realised that introducing Series 2 meant introducing a lot of new elements, so I decided to focus on getting the first few episodes covered instead. The second series of Lupin III was doing pretty well on TV, so TMS decided to make a feature-length movie, marking the second Lupin movie after Strange Psychokinetic Strategy, but the first one to be animated. The secret/mystery of Mamo came together thanks to a combination of people who worked on Series 1 and 2, as well as a few newcomers. Long-time Lupin contributor Yasuo Otsuka returned to supervise, with Series 1 storyboarder Soji Yoshikawa coming in to direct, as well as to collaborate on the screenplay with Atsushi Yamatoya. Yuji Ono came on as composer, and the core cast of Series 2 all voiced their respective characters. On the note of voices, this movie has 4 English dubs to its name, though each has its reason. The earliest dub by Toho was done for Japan Airlines as in-flight entertainment, with Fujiko being renamed to Margot, Goemon simply being called Samurai, Zenigata becoming Ed Scott, and Jigen getting the name Dan Dunn. Evidently the translators for this dub were fans of Tijuana Bibles or something. The second dub, done by Streamline, was made for the American markets and kept most of the original names. The third, done by Manga UK, was done to get around the whole Lupin Wolf issue with the LeBlanc estate. Finally, the fourth, done by Genion, was done as a means of keeping the voice cast consistent with the English dub of Series 2. Released in December of 1978 between episodes 62 and 63, the movie was initially just released as Lupin III. With a budget of 500 million yen, the movie actually managed to bring in 950 million, considered a success in the 1970s. Likely due to not having to spend quite as much on marketing as companies today. Possibly due to the format and staff involved, the movie is much more adult, bringing it closer in nature to the pilot and manga. We even see the return of Series 1 antagonist Flinch, as well as Agent Gordon. Granted, with the redesign it's debatable as to whether it's the same guy, but seeing as they're both FBI agents, I like to think they are. I should also note that he's based on G. Gordon Liddy, meaning that the Series 1 episode happened a few months before Watergate, and this movie shortly after his release. Anyway, I've waffled on enough, so let's take a look at the movie. Lupin has been caught, tried and executed. No tricks, no disguises, no mannequins. An autopsy proved that the man they apprehended is indeed the real Lupin III. Naturally, Zenigata doesn't believe it, and travels out to Transylvania, Lupin's final resting place. And it's here that one realises it wasn't just Cagliostro that influenced Castlevania. The coffin explodes, and Lupin appears behind Zenigata still alive. I mean, let's face it, if Lupin was really dead, this would either be a very short movie, or the rest of the runtime will be dedicated to the rest of the gang reminiscing about past adventures. And TMS will be damned if their first feature film is going to be a clip show. All that said, Lupin's not exactly sure why he's alive either, but takes the time to leave in style, with Zenigata declaring he'll follow Lupin to the ends of the earth. He tracks Lupin down to Egypt, who was taken to the time-honoured tradition of pyramid robbing. No curses to worry about this time, hopefully. He finds his target, a small stone, and evades Zenigata while he argues with the Egyptian police chief on how best to apprehend Lupin, escaping across a tightrope with Goemon taking the guards outside. The job was a request by Fujiko, working for a mysterious voice. She meets with Lupin and they play their usual flirting game until she paralyses him and swipes the stone. She meets with Flinch, who is working with the voice, said voice identifying himself as Mamo before destroying the stone, revealing it as a fake that Lupin bugged to listen in on. The stone is none other than the Philosopher's Stone. I was kind of expecting it to be more impressive looking than a lump of coal, to be honest. Mamo is not pleased at being tricked, sending an attack helicopter after the gang. They escape to the sewers, but it follows them down, though Goemon makes short work of it. Fujiko drives in to help them, but they ditch her and steal her car. The ruckus has also attracted the police, who chase the gang along a cliffside only to be followed by Optimus Prime, apparently. Zenigata mistakes it for police backup, but Prime does not discriminate and runs over the pursuing police cars in its chase of Lupin. The gang manage to escape by driving underneath it and heading into a side road, with its giant size not managing to manoeuvre quite as well and going over a cliff. Should TF Wiki count this as one of the many deaths of Optimus Prime? The gang return to their hideout to find it reduced to rubble, and tensions start to mount, so Lupin breaks it up and proposes travelling along the border to reach the Atlantic. It's a bit of a walk. Lupin even comes across a table with a water jug on it, and it's not a mirage. It is explosive though. It happens. They eventually come across a hut with supplies, and an injured Fujiko manages to catch up to them. She tells them Flinch tortured her, and Lupin is angry that that Flinch could be so cruel, and takes her in. Jigen and Goemon are not thrilled by this and decide to move on, feeling Fujiko's endangered them too much by now. Making the best of it, Lupin and Fujiko have some alone time, but Fujiko drugged Lupin's food and has Flinch carry him off. Jigen returns to find them flying away, but only manages to take out a wheel and a small piece of paper that floats from the plane. He makes it to Madrid, where Gordon tracks him and Goemon down. Taking them to director Stucky, they're interrogated about a recording from Mamo, demanding any information from them. Jigen shrugs them off and mocks this as a warped idea of democracy, but shows them the paper, with the only thing written on it being water. As Gordon and Stucky leave, Goemon notices the paper was dropped in a puddle of water, revealing it to change and indicate that Lupin is in the Caribbean. Meanwhile, Lupin tricks his captor into opening his cage and escapes, though he is currently in some weird MC Escher inspired nightmare land. He evades his Free Again guard and has a run-in with Napoleon and that guy from Persona 2 Innocent Sin. Hearing music, he follows it and finally meets Mamo. Lupin asks if he's in some kind of asylum, but Mamo assures him that they're the real deal. Mamo has selected Lupin as a candidate for eternal life, but Lupin isn't interested. Hearing this, Mamo shrugs and walks away on air, though Lupin calls his bluff as using Pike's old reinforced glass trick, but falls anyway. I guess Mamo cut a hole in it. Jigen, Goemon and a stowaway Zenigata have tracked down Lupin's location, the private island of Howard Lockwood, Mamo's public persona, with Gordon and Stucky using satellites to follow them. Lupin explores and discovers where the Philosopher's Stone is being studied, also noticing some rather creepy imagery in the room he's observing from. He steals it back and in his escape runs into Fujiko. The two of them start going at it again, but remember they're still being chased, finally evading Flinch by using an underground lift, which takes them directly to Mamo. Yeah, I hate people getting lovey-dovey in front of me too. I feel your pain. Mamo claims he's been experimenting with life for over 10,000 years, and tells Lupin that Fujiko is another candidate for eternal life. Fujiko counters that if Lupin isn't, then neither is she. See, she does care. Angered, Mamo straps Lupin down and decides to probe his subconscious. He goes in deep and finds Lupin's mind blank, declaring it as the mind of either a god or a complete fool. In Lupin's case, probably both. Lupin loses consciousness, but the process is interrupted by America saving the day the best way they know how. Jigen and Goemon also catch up, take out Mamo, and carry Lupin away only to be intercepted by Flinch again. Goemon fights Flinch, though Zantetsuken is damaged by Flinch's metal vest. Flinch goes down with a second attack, using the old split screen showing a split head technique, but Goemon feels shamed that his swordsmanship caused Zantetsuken to break. They still need to escape, so use a speedboat. A following Zenigata gets into a rowboat, anticipating the rope it's tied to, except it was tied to the wrong boat. And then the airstrike reaches his location, forcing him to swim back to the mainland. Surfacing in Colombia, Zenigata meets with none other than the Commissioner. Again, different design, but one could argue it's been 5 to 6 years since they last saw each other, and appearances can change. Treating him to a meal and making mention of a daughter that never seems to come up again, the Commissioner gives Zenigata news that he's off the Lupin case. Given Mamo's public persona, fear of a diplomatic incident is arising. Zenigata rejects this, saying he'll arrest Lupin as an officer or a civilian before charging out. Meanwhile, the gang recover in a hotel, Goemon having headed off for a while. Jigen hands Lupin the tip of Zantetsuken and they discuss what Mamo's been up to. Lupin deduces cloning given what he saw on the island, and Mamo congratulates him, putting him through a mind trip. He also tries to mess with Lupin's head, suggesting that the one who died may or may not have been the clone. As the room returns to normal, Lupin discovers it as more smoke and mirrors, but Mamo appears again and mind controls Fujiko into coming with him, leaving Lupin with an earthquake after Lupin challenges his claim of godhood. Lupin isn't scared and prepares for the final battle, but Jigen decides to opt out, worrying that this foe may be too much for them. Lupin tracks Mamo down to some old ruins, discovering a hefty payload and a group of Mamo's clones. He fights the clones off, and one that is degraded explains that he's basically the equivalent of a photocopy that's been photocopied, with the original Mamo still in preservation. The Mamo with Fujiko urges her to push a button that will restart the world, in his words, leaving him as Adam and Fujiko as his own Jane. As you may have guessed, this is the button to launch his missiles across the world, and Mamo contacts the President to inform him. Now, given the time frame, it should be Carter, but depending on the dub, you might hear an impersonation of Clinton or even George Bush Jr. Granted, given it was Lupin anyway, maybe that's the joke. Lupin has sabotaged the missiles and chases Mamo down, but Mamo makes use of his own personal Vecna gun's lasers to keep him at bay, though he's nice enough to put Lupin at ease by revealing that the clone was the one executed at the beginning of the movie. Cutting himself on the piece of Zantetsuken, Lupin charges forward and uses it to deflect the lasers back at Mamo, incinerating him. Discovering the chip in the remains, this one wasn't the original one either. The panel opens and reveals... he's a gigantic brain! He's been controlling the Mamo clones and seems to have some kind of telekinesis, as Lupin can only briefly get close. Deciding he wants to be a god elsewhere, he activates a rocket and departs for, I don't know, the Lilac system, I guess. He doesn't get too far as Lupin managed to plant a bomb when he got close and it explodes in space. Lupin and Fujiko manage to get out in time, but Fujiko fakes injury and allows Lupin to be caught by Zenigata for her own freedom. They share a big damn kiss before he's hauled off, and America saves the day again, with an implication that Gordon is on the list of people to be erased during this saving. Jigen flies to the rescue but only manages to grab Fujiko. Still chained together, Lupin and Zenigata manage to team up to escape as we're played out by the song Lupin Ondo. So, this was actually the third movie I saw back in the days of the Sci-Fi Channel spelling its name properly. I was a bit surprised when I first learned it was the first movie, as there seems to be a bit of a breaking of the fellowship undertone to it. Jigen's never been shy about his dislike of Fujiko and complaining that Lupin thinks with his Walther too much when it comes to her, but even Goemon has a stance of sick of your BS here. One thing that didn't help is that the manga UK dub, the one I originally watched, added a line about Goemon committing seppuku in retribution for breaking Zantetsuken. Obviously doesn't happen, seeing as he gets the last line in the movie, but hopefully you can see where I'm coming from. I omitted a bit on how this movie was titled too, as it was later re-released in Japan as Lupin vs. the Clone, given the many movies that will follow. Kinda spoils the whole premise with that name though, so I can see why the English release opted for the title it did. With all that said, how is it as a movie? Firstly, I'd say worth watching at least once. Being the first movie, it doesn't fall into a lot of the tropes that the later movies adopt, making it stand out as quite unique in that regard. The art direction's good, with TMS definitely putting their money to good use in the visuals. I noted the undertone of the Fellowship breaking, but let's face it, the gang was never going to stay separated for long. and there's plenty of good action, like Optimus Prime, as well as comedic moments, like Lupin stealing Fujiko's car only for her to call him out as a thief. Not that she's wrong, but she's hardly a paragon herself. Also, unlike some later movies, everyone feels like they have a good contribution to the narrative, with each person getting a good deal of screen time and something to do. Another thing it does is to get the heist out of the way early to focus on why they stole this thing and for whom. More often than not, the heist is stretched out across the movie, so you have the result as the payoff. So for it to be resolved before the 10-minute mark is certainly not what you'd see in many of the later movies. So yeah, overall, I'd say give it a watch if you can. Next time, back on track with Series 2 as we cover episodes 5 to 8. Or possibly Castle of Cagliostro if you're in the future and I've gotten that far. Until then,